One thing I really liked was the discussion about whether agencies should be allowed flexibility in customization or forced to standardize. I thought that was really interesting. And I liked the point about how too much customization could also lead to long term technical debt and costly upgrades, which I think could be really important during this project. But Eric, for you, what in large scale transformations, how do you strike the right balance between standardization and allowing agencies to maintain processes that are critical to them?
Well, I mean, that is the huge question that I don't know that I don't know that we could really answer that in the discussion with Aaron, and I don't know that I still can, to be honest. I mean, without having the right, I mean, first of all, if I back up, it all starts with project governance. I mean, how are you gonna govern the project? How are you gonna make decisions? Who's gonna make decisions? What are the priorities? As far as if it comes down to it, and there's two or more different agencies or departments that have differing needs that conflict with one another, who decides? I mean, first of all, who decides who's right or wrong, or who takes precedent? Second of all, how do you get to that point, to where you bring that stuff to the surface, because you do need to get that out. It's sort of like it's just a messy process with a lot of risk buried within it, and you've got to get that risk out on the table, out to the surface as quick as you can, or else it's just going to come up later, and it's going to be a lot more risky and expensive to fix it later. If you don't catch it soon enough. So I think it starts with project governance. It starts with working through your future state processes and really aligning on what those processes are going to be, because inevitably what will happen in this project is you are going to have however many dozens of different agencies, and you're just not going to come out with one clear answer on any business process. I would argue, I think every single process that they try to get alignment on, they're probably going to have a certain amount of misalignment, and you're just going to have to work through that. The key is, when do they work through that? Do they do it up front, before the meter starts running on the big, massive technical build out? Or do they end up deferring that and just waiting and see what happens when Cognizant's already there, billing by the hour? They've got an army of consultants there. And if you start working through that while the meter's running, and it takes you longer to make decisions as a result, that's where the time and especially the budget overruns and debacles happen, is because you couldn't make the decision. The meter keeps running on the project. You're still spending whatever you're spending each week and each month. But because you didn't figure that stuff out up front, now you're paying for it. You're basically paying to make decisions, because you've got idle time while people are waiting for you to make those decisions.
Yeah, absolutely. And another thing I found really interesting, given that this is a government project, obviously, I liked the point about how you guys said at a high level, the government agencies have a shared mission to serve their citizens. But once you really get into the project, you have to really get into the individual processes. And obviously, resistance is inevitable once you get there. But this just made me think about how you can make people feel like they are a part of the bigger picture while still addressing their specific concerns. But I guess more specifically, a question for you: how can organizations like this effectively communicate that bigger picture benefit of a transformation while also addressing the concerns of the individuals?
Yeah, that is a tricky one as well, because I think, we talked about this with Aaron, where, it's probably fairly easy to align on the fact that we're all trying to make, if we're on this Matrix ERP project, we're all on the same page with what we want to accomplish as a government, as a governing body. We want the lives of UK residents to be better. We want them to be happier. We want them to have the resources they need. We want them to be safe. We want the UK to excel worldwide. All these different things that we could probably all agree on if we're part of the UK government. But once you start digging into like what you do day to day to contribute your small little part to that bigger vision, that's where the breakdowns happen, and that's where the misalignment happens. And that's where it gets real personal too, especially because, as we talked about, some of these different agencies have such different goals and objectives that all line up to the bigger picture goal, but the way you do it is so different. I think Aaron talked about the differences between the department or the Treasury Department versus the Department of Space. Those are such different, big picture goal. Yep, they're probably accomplishing the same thing, but when you get down to it, those are two very different, potentially conflicting sets of needs. So that it's a tough thing, and really the only way around it, in my opinion, is two things. One would be the project governance, which we've talked a lot about, getting the right project governance and decision making processes in place, so it's very clear how decisions get made, who makes those decisions, who ends up being the mediator or arbitrator of what the best answer is for the overall government, which is a very difficult job, I would imagine. So that's one, is that project governance and decision making. Second would be just getting the future state processes out on the table as soon as you possibly can. And really that starts with the current state, understanding what each of these entities are doing in their current state, and then quickly shifting to what is the future state going to look like. And that's where the real work happens or needs to focus, because that's where the discrepancies come in. That's where there's misalignments, not only between different departments, but also between the departmental needs and the technology itself. Keep in mind, we're talking about a SaaS-based product that doesn't have an infinite amount of flexibility. So you just aren't, even if you wanted to, you just aren't able to take Workday and customize it for each of these different departments. Or if you do, it's going to be really, really expensive and really risky. And I would argue you're probably not ever going to finish that project. So I think those two things, project governance and decision-making, getting the business process optimization work out on the table as early as possible so that you can get that alignment and work through that messy process up front, so that by the time you bring in Cognizant and all the technical implementers of the project, they have clear direction and there's a clear blueprint of how they're going to build technology.